They're amazing.
They really are. I'm like, what? Hey everyone, I'm Josh Whitehead with Greenhaven Forge. In this video, you're going to watch me show you what can be done with really minimal skills and minimal tools. In this video, you're going to watch me make a hook knife and this sloyd knife, straight knife, for carving a spoon. Hope you enjoy. I bought a $10 hairdryer on Amazon, and then a $3 voltage, AC voltage controller that I put inside this box off of eBay. And so this controls how hard the blower goes. And I taped it to a piece of pipe. I'm already getting red on the end there. What I'm doing here is thinning down a part for the hook. And right now I'm hitting at an angle because we're going to use hand tools to sharpen the bevel of this knife. We want it to be thinner than just a straight piece of metal. And what I'm doing is making a narrower blade, because as this wants to cut through wood, you want it narrow so you're not hitting too much surface area on a spoon. So I'm bringing it in and I'm elongating it, and then I'm going to thin the cutting edge. A hook knife is a single beveled item, so we really only have to add this bevel, this angle in on one side. Okay, so now we've got a blade that we can shape into a hook. So this is a right-handed hook, because I'm right-handed. So I want to face, this is my cutting edge. So I'm going to bend the hook over this edge away and keep the tang flat. So I've started creating this bend. And then after I heat it again, I'm going to curve that hook back around. And just use the hammer to really just brush this corner over. And then just keep really slowly bending it into a shape that I like for a hook knife. I might straighten it out a bit. Alright, and that's our hook knife. So I'm going to use a chisel and hot cut probably right through here. As I forge down on this point to create a point, it gets thicker. So I don't want it just to get thicker and thicker. I want it to maintain a even thickness, and then I will actually taper this thickness from thick down to thin. I'm hitting in the same exact place every time. I'm not chasing the metal with my hammer. I'm pulling the metal underneath my hammer, making sure that it's curving the right way we want it to. It's still fairly thick right through here, so I'm going to continue to thin it down. So these two pieces, what I'm going to do now is we're going to put them back in this forge. These pieces cool inside of this coal. They're going to cool really slowly, and that's going to soften this steel as soft as it can possibly be. And we want this steel to be dead soft because we're going to be using hand files and hand sanding to shape these. So the softer the better. And with that, those tools are forged. So here we have our two knives. We've got a hook knife and a straight knife. I have totally done projects like this in a $20 drill vise. You just clamp it down to a work surface, a table, anything really, and you can use it to hold your work and then start filing. We are going to sharpen this to approximately a 25-degree bevel angle. We're going to really convex the back of this hook knife so that it cuts well inside of a hollow, like a hollow form, like a spoon, that dished shape. So the leading edge, that very fine cutting edge, might be at a different angle, but we're going to just establish one bevel and then start turning it into a curve. So before I take this edge any thinner, I'm going to try and smooth out the back of this a little bit so that once we get down to this edge, it doesn't undulate too much in or out. I can use a round file. We're gonna work as flat as we possibly can across the back of this hook. So you can also use a chainsaw file. I'm still here. The last thing I'm trying to do is there's a few areas down in here where we still have basically rough forged material, and we want to get all of that out. So I'm going to put it blade up, and I'm just going to run the file kind of lengthwise across it to get it relatively flat. So right in here you can still see rough forged material, so we need to get rid of all of that. So I'm going to keep filing across this edge until it's gone. We have smooth, clean steel all the way around the hook of our cutting edge now.
Cheers, how much?
It's been probably 3 or 4 more minutes on this main bevel, and we have just brought it down. It's pretty even thickness all the way around. We don't want to take it too thin with the files because the file is quite an aggressive cut, and anywhere that the file teeth cross this cutting edge, it's just going to leave really deep marks even if we highly sand and highly polish this. So unfortunately now we have to slow down on the cutting edge. I'm going to flip over here on the other end of my vise, and I'm going to take off a very similar to this bevel on the back, and then we're going to blend those two bevels together to create a very convex outer edge on this knife. We've worked in an angle so that now we can start taking off this center line. So this process is actually exactly how I would go about things on my big belt grinder over here. Same exact steps, it just goes a lot quicker. Now we get to start hand sanding and hand polishing this. So I'm going to start out with some 80 grit sandpaper. We're going to probably try to stay away from our main bevel, but we're going to start polishing all the back of this, and then we'll start polishing the inside. I'm going to use a piece of hardwood as a backing, wrap my sandpaper around it, and start sanding. Water is just going to help carry away all the metal filings and lubricate things. All I did was I went with an 80 grit sandpaper, wet dry, to 120, 240, 500, 1000, and then just use the bottom of my leather apron to just really buff away the scratches. We've still not really hit this primary bevel because we're going to be doing a lot more work on that after we heat treat it. So it's just really not important to hit that. The only thing we need to be careful of is when we're sanding, we don't round that edge over. So at this point, we can flip it over and start on the back. Let me grab some 80 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to wrap it around a piece of dowel rod. All right, I've already gotten the 80 grit and the 120 grit, and we're now at 240 grit. As I'm going through this, I'm really trying to keep the back of this as flat as possible, not rocking side to side. I don't want to convex the back of this hook. All right, we've got our 500 grit finish. Gonna go ahead and soak up a piece of 1000 grit. All right, so I've hit the 1000 grit, and then I just once again used the corner of my apron here, and we've just kind of polished this up. Obviously our edge is very rough still because we have to take it down a ways after our heat treat, but the rest of the knife is fairly nice and polished and ready for heat treating. We're ready to start on the straight blade here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp it up in the vise. I'm going to work on the back, making sure that it's nice and flat, and then we're going to bring in this bevel. I've profiled the edge down to the way I want it. The back is nice and flat, and now we can start hand filing the bevels. Not everybody's going to want to hand file a knife start to finish, and a lot of people do have angle grinders, and in fact I bought an angle grinder a while back because I couldn't travel to my shop to get another angle grinder. Bought one at Harbor Freight. It was like $18. So I'm going to show what I would do on the other bevel, just using an angle grinder and a hard rock disc. Alright, we finally reached the heat treating stage. Both these blades have been profiled, shaped the way we want them, and we can now get them hard. So I'm taking these blades in and out of the fire. Just the blower is on really low so that I can bring them up to temperature rather slowly, not too hot, like a low orange color. And then we're going to let them air cool a couple times to reduce the size of the grain inside the steel so that we get a really keen cutting edge. So I'm looking at the colors, making sure that before I go back into the fire, all the color has gone from this steel. I don't want it glowing at all. And I'm going to set it on this brick, and I'm going to cycle in my straight blade. I'm just going back and forth. We're going to do this 2, maybe 3 times. We're at 2 times. I'm going to bring this in. Okay, we're going to do heat treat. So I'm bringing this hook up to temperature and getting ready to quench in my little metal tank over here. It's just canola oil. Get the color just right. We're going to move that blade in a back and forth motion and cool it completely. And that is ready for tempering, and now I'm going to do the sloyd knife. One of the indications I have here of good hardness is that any scale that built up has popped off the surface of this metal when I quenched it, indicating the metal shrank away from the jacket of iron oxide it had created. So we should have a good structure. really just getting an even color on it. Those blades are hardened now, and all we have to do is put them in any kitchen oven, toaster oven, 400 degrees to backen up some of that hardness, give it some toughness. So I'm going to use a little 240 grit sandpaper to scuff these up. Bring out some of that metal so that I can see the temper colors of these when they go in this little toaster oven. You can certainly use your kitchen oven if your wife lets you. Mine does not. So I'm just gonna pop these in this toaster oven. I've set it to 400 degrees. It's gonna run for an hour or so. And that's taking away a lot of that extra hardness that we just put in there in that quench. It's glass hard. If we dropped one of these right now, it would probably just break instantly. And so this tempering cycle relieves some of the stresses, some of that hardness, and gives it toughness and makes it actually a working blade. So very crucial step. Don't forget it. So I've actually put these through 2 tempering cycles. What I did after the first one was use this really cheap little diamond stone to go ahead and clean the metal up, because it was really covered in oil and everything from our quench before. So I cleaned it up and retempered at the same temperature, 400 degrees, and you can see that kind of golden brown color. That's what we're going for. So on the hook, I'm going to use a diamond stone to really start bringing that edge down. You really have to be careful with this part. I would say when making your first tools, make this bevel shallower than you think it needs to be. Pretty shallow. It's probably not going to hold that edge when you start to carve with it. It might roll, but you can. It's a whole lot easier to increase the angle of that edge from shallow to sharper than it is to bring it back. It's a whole lot more work to make a really steep angle shallower. Really lay that bevel on a piece of wood and get a feel for if it's way up here, you're just tilting really far, and if it's way back here, you're not going to be able to scoop really well. Just kind of getting a feel for the angle that this thing is going to ride into the wood, and I'm just going to follow that with this diamond stone. First, I want to clean out the back of this hook, give it a little bit of a polish, and then we'll sharpen it from the front. Give the paper a little spritz. And here again, we're keeping this as flat as possible. I don't want to rock side to side. I don't want to create a curve on the back of this. I've cleaned out the back of the hook, and I'm just gonna go up to a 1200, just give it a little bit better polish. To do the final polish on the back of this, you could use a leather strop. A lot of times I'll take leather and glue it around a dowel rod, and you really want something like this for when you're doing your sharpening and your honing going forward. But if you don't have time, you just rub some buffing compound on the dowel rod you've been using for sharpening, and just use that. So I'm just going to use this Harbor Freight sharpening stone I picked up years ago. I'm just using this to really bring the that edge into sharp. I'm holding it at the angle that I want to put on here, and we're gonna put maybe a shallower angle on than it will take. You'll feel, everybody talks when they're talking about sharpening, a burr, and your fingernail will catch it as it approaches the edge. You can hear catching, and we're gonna just keep working around this edge until I can feel that all the way. All right, so I've gone over the whole edge with the diamond, and I've gotten where I can feel this burr all the way. And I like apexing the edge, getting that burr with a stone, something that doesn't flex, doesn't roll. When I use wet dry sandpaper, that little bit of give can maybe roll the edge too much. Get this polished up. This just helps cut back on friction when carving. We're gonna start working back and forth between the back of the hook and the edge of the hook to polish that burr off and get a nice razor edge. I am not getting to the edge because I do not want to round that over too much. We're always trying to maintain that good bevel we're creating. We're going to go back to our dowel with the buffing compound and start polishing this guy away. We're just going to work this back and forth until you don't feel that burr anymore. Just using my, this was just a pine dowel from Home Depot that I used some glue to glue a strip of leather around. Alright, we are getting pretty sharp. I'm going to go ahead and, for the very first time, this thing is really performing. I'm happy with that. We're gonna get up in here with our little diamond stone. When you start bringing this in, you don't want to roll over, but apply pressure down to the cutting edge because we're sharpening this for the very first time. We want to get all the way down to that cutting edge and start producing our burr. I keep, lifting it up and checking it, making sure that my scratch patterns are getting all the way down to my cutting edge. We're just going to keep working up the blade. And as you get closer to the tip, because your bevel is narrower, it gets easy to really rock this back and forth. You might have to go real nice and slow to make sure you're not rolling around. You can see how high my bevel is there compared to there. It's really close, but I'm going to work from this side for a little bit. We're going to start stropping this and see if we can get it sharp. I use an old leather belt sometimes, so just use what you have. Alright, so after a few minutes of working back and forth on this strop, I've knocked that burr off, and we're pretty sharp, and not a lot to hold on to yet, but test it through some in-grain cherry. Alright, we are ready to put a handle on this beast. For handle choices, we have 1,000,001 choices. I grabbed a stick. I'm just going to go with this for the knife handle. Rather than trying to cut a slot that this tang is going to fit in, I'm going to drill a big hole, 3/8, something big enough that that tang will fit all the way down in. And then I'm going to use a 3/8 dowel rod, split it, and fit that on either side in this big hole, and we're going to just glue that in with epoxy. Push that up in the hole. We'll use a pencil to mark how deep. Might have to thin them out a little bit. I'm gonna use some sandpaper and just sand these a little bit thinner. Drop them in that hole. Drop the tang of the blade down. You can see that is a nice fit, and we'll just get nicer with the use of some epoxy. What I've got here is just a section of a little small hemp cord. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this loop and just wrapping as close and tight as I possibly can. Alright, so now that I've gotten to the end, what I'm going to do is take this and push it through that loop, cut it off just past the loop. Grab this end down here and pull this so the ends are both up inside our binding, and that is secured on there really tight. So to wrap these up and finalize it, now that we've got our binding done on this guy, we are gonna drop some epoxy. I'm using a 24-hour epoxy. It's what I use for all my tools. It's tough stuff. I way overfilled this on purpose. Right there we have 2 of our 3 tools that we will need to carve a spoon. The third tool is going to be an axe or something to do the chopping. You don't want to really start carving a spoon with nothing but a knife. It really helps to have something to remove a lot of extra waste. So that's going to be our next video, is working on the chopping tool. Thanks for watching.